The night the storm knocked out the power across Cedar Falls, Iowa, a single father named Caleb Morgan found a woman asleep on a bus stop bench with tears still wet on her cheeks, and by sunrise, she would wake up holding his hand as if, for the first time in years, she had finally found somewhere safe to rest. Caleb had never believed that one ordinary act of kindness could change the direction of several lives at once. He was simply a tired father trying to get his 8-year-old son, Noah, home before the weather became worse. But when he noticed the woman shivering beneath the weak shelter of the bus stop, something inside him refused to let him walk away. If you believe that kindness, compassion, hope, forgiveness, and second chances can still change lives, take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us there is still goodness in the world. The woman's name was Grace Bennett. She was 32, had spent the last several months working 2 jobs while caring for her elderly aunt, and had been carrying more responsibilities than she ever admitted to anyone. That evening, her car had broken down several miles outside town, her phone battery had died, and after walking for what felt like forever through the cold rain, she had finally reached the bus stop. There was no bus coming because the storm had disrupted service, but Grace didn't know that. She only knew that her legs hurt, her clothes were soaked, and her mind had reached the point where even standing upright felt impossible. She sat down for what she thought would be a minute, closed her eyes, and surrendered to exhaustion. Caleb approached with Noah tucked beneath his raincoat, both of them carrying a small grocery bag that had nearly fallen apart in the rain. Caleb had lost his wife 3 years earlier after a long illness, and since then, his life had become a careful routine built around work, school lunches, bills, bedtime stories, and making sure Noah never felt alone. He recognized exhaustion when he saw it. Without waking Grace, he placed his spare jacket over her shoulders and called the local emergency shelter. The roads were becoming dangerous, and he knew leaving her there wasn't an option. When the shelter confirmed they had space but advised waiting until the storm eased, Caleb and Noah stayed nearby beneath the bus shelter, quietly watching over her. Eventually, Grace stirred. Her eyes opened briefly, but before she could understand where she was, another wave of exhaustion pulled her back into sleep. Caleb sat beside her, keeping enough distance to respect her privacy while making sure she was warm. Noah, who had always possessed an unusual tenderness for people who were hurting, quietly placed his little knitted scarf beside her. Caleb smiled at his son and wrapped an arm around him. For a few minutes, the 3 of them sat together while rain tapped steadily against the shelter roof. Near dawn, the storm finally weakened. Caleb reached over to wake Grace gently, but she moved in her sleep and her hand accidentally found his. Instead of pulling away, Caleb remained still. When Grace opened her eyes, she froze. Her fingers were wrapped around Caleb's hand, and for a moment she looked embarrassed. But then she noticed the jacket around her shoulders, the scarf beside her, and the little boy sleeping peacefully against his father's side. Something in her expression changed. She had spent so long believing that needing help made her weak that she had forgotten what it felt like to simply be cared for without being asked for anything in return. Caleb drove Grace to the shelter once the roads were safe, but their paths did not end there. The following week, Grace discovered that the small community center where Caleb volunteered needed someone to coordinate their food pantry. She applied, not because she expected anything from him, but because she wanted to rebuild her life somewhere that reminded her people could still be kind. Caleb was surprised when she was hired, and Noah was even happier because Grace quickly became the person who remembered which storybook he liked best. Months passed, and Grace slowly learned that strength did not always mean carrying everything alone. Caleb learned that opening his heart again did not betray the memory of his wife. Noah learned that families could grow in unexpected ways without replacing anyone who had come before. One spring afternoon, Caleb found Grace sitting on the same bench where he had first discovered her, except this time she wasn't crying or exhausted. She was smiling while watching Noah play soccer across the field. Grace looked at Caleb and told him that she had once thought the worst night of her life was the night she lost her car, her job security, and the feeling that she could manage everything. But now she understood that it had actually been the night her life quietly changed direction. Caleb smiled because he knew exactly what she meant. Sometimes God does not answer our prayers by removing the storm. Sometimes He answers by sending someone who sits beside us until the storm passes. If this story touched your heart, please support it with a like, share it with someone who may need a reminder that they are not alone, and subscribe if you want more stories about hope, family, kindness, and second chances. And before this story ends, leave a comment telling us about one small act of kindness you have never forgotten. Your words might encourage someone else who is going through a difficult season. A year later, Caleb and Grace returned to that same bus stop with Noah. They had brought blankets, warm meals, and coffee for people waiting in the cold. It had become their quiet tradition. Caleb never forgot the woman he had found sleeping there, and Grace never forgot the man who had simply stayed when he could have walked away. She had fallen asleep from exhaustion that night, but when she woke up holding Caleb's hand, she discovered something far more valuable than a place to rest. She discovered that even after life had emptied her hands, kindness could place something new inside them, hope. And sometimes, the beginning of a beautiful new chapter is nothing more complicated than one tired person deciding not to leave another tired person alone.